Welcome to Decision 2020, the U.S. House of Representatives Candidate Forum. This is an opportunity for voters to hear directly from the candidates. Today, we turn our attention to the U.S. House of Representatives race in Michigan's 6th Congressional District, where Republican incumbent U.S. Representative Fred Upton faces Democratic challenger John Hoadley, Libertarian Jeff DuPois, and Green Party candidate John Lawrence. We continue Decision 2020, the U.S. House of Representatives Candidate Forum for Michigan's 6th Congressional District. Today's forum was recorded Friday, October 16th from the studios of the Meijer Public Broadcast Center at Grand Valley State University. Joining us now is Green Party candidate John Lawrence from Kalamazoo. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the offer.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and why serving in Congress is important to you.
Well, for me, it's kind of been the political activism and such started a lot when I started going to college at Western Michigan University. And that's when I sort of became aware of much of the dysfunction and the issues with our political process as we see today. And then it was shortly after that in 2014 that I ran the first time, just kind of to get my feet wet and see what would happen, I guess, and as Green Party. And now here I am again, doing it again. I spent, I guess, just spending the time that I have seeing some of the things that I've seen both here in Southwest Michigan. And then I worked, or I lived, excuse me, in Chicago for a couple of years before I came back here. And that was very interesting too. And then now, well, not to segue too much or talk too much, but, you know, I work in the healthcare industry right now too. And so with what we're dealing with right now, I think that's such a pressing matter and something that definitely is on my mind as well as so many other people's minds right now. And so I think it just made me, I was at a point where I was like, you know what, I'm going to put my name on the ballot again. If nothing else, I'm going to put it on there and go from there, I guess.
Well, being in healthcare, this next question will be right up your alley. The coronavirus pandemic is a public health crisis, now impacting or killing, I should say, 215,000 Americans so far this year. It's impacting the economy, education, society at large. In Congress, what steps would you promote stemming the spread of the disease and supporting the economy and our schools?
Well, I think the biggest thing here, and it's all just going to segue back to this point, and you hear it from so many other people that are on the progressive left in Congress, is there's no reason why every person in this country isn't getting adequate health care coverage. The Medicare for All system is the only way that really realistically saves money. That's the thing that I don't think anyone ever talks about enough. It actually would cover everyone and save the taxpayers money by a significant amount. And then it would streamline the process and make everything so much easier in terms of getting people in and out of hospitals. I mean, there's so many forms, there's so much documentation, there's all this kind of stuff. And you have to have that on some level because obviously these are people's, medical lives at risk and everything has to be confidential. But when it comes to forms for billing, I mean, we're just delaying the whole process of getting people care. So I think that's the main thing. The Medicare for All thing would fix a lot of problems. Obviously, when you're talking about schools and that kind of issue, I mean, that's, to me, I think this whole rush to get everybody back to school, I get that kids do need socialization. They do need to come together, and that's a really important learning part for them. But I think a lot of these school districts have tried to rush to make this happen when it was unnecessary. So I really applaud the districts that have been doing a lot of the online learning and finding ways to make that work, especially for, I would say, for the older, high school age. And then when you get to college, because to me, you're at that point, you're at a level where you can actually do it online and you don't necessarily need so much of the face-to-face as much. But I get it, for younger kids, they do need that contact. So I think it's just trying to put in place policies and proposals that would be smart and would actually keep people safe while like looking at the problem medically, and scientifically, and not just turning it into a political situation.
The pandemic is impacting Americans' activities. What action should be taken ensuring the presidential election is free, fair, and secure?
Well, this is such a tricky one. I mean, the problem is, so, obviously me being green and not being a Democrat, I have a lot of issues with sort of this idea that vote, vote, vote. Well, that's great. Vote, vote, vote. And you should. And I'm 100% on board with that. And everybody should. But it does present this dilemma of how do you check the man in power and make sure that this stuff isn't being, there aren't illegalities and complete constitutional, breaks of law going on with this. I think the big thing is that I mean, some of the stuff that stands out the most, you have all these, not as much here in Michigan, but when you look at the country at large, you have so much of these issues where you have cities and districts where they just have such limited polling places for actual in-person voting. And I think that's just a deliberate attempt to try to keep people from voting. When somebody has to wait 4, 5, 6, 8 hours, you see this kind of stuff on social media that people post about even now, even early voting. And that's ridiculous. I mean, I think legally we can try to pass some kind of law, framework laws that would at least, make it's tricky because you're dealing with states' rights versus the federal rights, and I completely understand that. But I mean, that kind of stuff just is number one. Like, if nothing else, that should be stopped, because we got to allow people to vote, and then after they can actually vote, then we get to the tricky business of like, how do we make sure that this is all on the up and up, and no matter what's going to happen, you're going to have somebody claiming that there's some conspiracy, especially when it comes from the mouth of the president himself. He said it several times. So I don't know if there really is an easy answer for that, to be honest. And I think that's what sometimes we struggle with saying, but I think you have to have as many checks in there as you can to try to legitimize the process, and you have to allow people to be able to vote. I mean, whether that means early voting or mail to home balloting or any of that kind of stuff. It's expanding all that is really, really good for the process, essentially.
You touched on the question that I'm about to ask you earlier. The Affordable Care Act has been long debated. What is the correct course for providing Americans with health care? Do you believe people with pre-existing conditions should be protected?
Oh, definitely. But and like I said, the Medicare for All system would do that. But I know people, the thing that scares everybody for that, and I think the Democrats don't necessarily do a good job with talking about it either, in a way that alleviates people's fears. The thing is, if you switch to a Medicare for All system, you're not going to switch and 2 weeks later the whole process is different. Like this, it would take several years, at least 3 or 4 years. I think that was the Sanders proposal actually that he was pushing to. It basically would go a timed transition to Medicare, so that you would continue to lower the age of eligibility. And so you'd get more people in the system, and it wouldn't be this like overnight, oh no, chaotic, everything's changed. Like, it would be a transition process, but you would try to do it as quick as possible, because that would be the best way to make it work. I mean, yeah, we're talking about expanding coverage and lowering prices and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I mean, I have friends that are from Europe and overseas, and they just laugh at our entire system, because it's like, why are we arguing over how do we make prescriptions cheaper and all this stuff when every other country in the world seems to have figured out? And like I said earlier, it's economically cheaper. That's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough. There's been several studies by different universities that say we'd save like, hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars over 10, 20, 30-year period if we move to that system. And I think that's the biggest thing we have to say too, is it's not just about care and the fact that, yeah, I want everybody to have care and coverage, and all these people that have died because they haven't had care and coverage, but it's also about, hey, this is fiscally conservative. Like, this is something that I think like conservative or Republican or right-wing people, libertarian, they should be on board with it, because it actually saves taxpayers money in the long run. That's my feelings on it anyway.
President Donald Trump has long made it a point of renegotiating trade deals. Some of the negotiating tactics include enacting tariffs. In your opinion, do you think the overall plan is working? Are there job-creating strategies that you support?
Well, it's the issue with his plans is that they're more talk than they are anything else, and the little bit that he actually does is pretty much counter to anything positive for the country in terms of that stuff. I mean, this whole idea, I think tariffs overall, based on the research that I've read on it, usually come back to bite the people that try to enact them or enable them on the others. And even if they don't, they just end up by and large impacting the poorest people in these countries that they're put on. They're the ones that suffer, not the leadership. So if you think it's going to like somehow change the Chinese leadership because now we're putting some tariffs on them, just as a random example, but it usually doesn't. It just usually means that they end up punishing the poorest people in their countries in order for them the wealthy to still be successful. But I mean, I think by and large, I'm not against some of the ideas that he ran on in theory originally, that NATO, or not NATO, but that our free to trade agreements here in the U.S. are bad in many ways. They are, but bad for the U.S. workforce. But there's this whole myth that I think we still are in love with here, and especially a lot of people, well, both in the Democrat and the Republican parties, to be honest. I think there's this myth that somehow we're going to get back to this American job creation behemoth of like the 1970s or 1980 or even in through the 90s, and I think that the research shows that's just not what's going to happen. I mean, you have really a multipolar world nowadays. You have China, you have India, you have all these economic superpowers that are on the scene. And I think this concept that somehow we're going to bring back these, factory jobs and all this, like to some degree, yeah, there still is a lot of factory workers. There still are a lot of those industrial jobs that do exist. People don't necessarily see them, but it's not on the level that it was of 40 years ago. And it's not going to be, because our labor isn't that cheap. We can't have that cheap labor to compete with this Southeast Asia, like I said, India and China and these countries, and nor should we, because we're supposed to be this modern industrialized nation that we have standards, and we're not going to pay our workers, crumb wages, $2 an hour, and then give them no benefits. So I think this whole race to the bottom mentality with that is ridiculous. I think the best way, this is maybe getting too far into the subject or talking too much on it, but I think if you want to have good relationships with these other countries, you're not going to put tariffs on them. You got to come to it from a reality of like speaking to them and being like, how do we better work together for all of us as a global community here? And I mean, that's not always easy when you're talking with authoritarian or right wing, left wing, all these different governments from all over the world. But I mean, on some level, I think the whole idea of the forest-based respect mentality that we've established in this country really since World War II, if you go all the way back to that, I think there's cracks in that now, and we're seeing that we can't just make threats, whether they're economic or military, and just expect that that's going to make the rest of the world fall in line to us. I mean, you have to find a way to bring everybody together, essentially, is what it comes down to.
We have 2.5 minutes. In Congress, how would you address racial injustice and police brutality?
This is a very serious issue. And I mean, the thing is, a lot of it, I think, comes down to right now, we're still just in the listening phases. I think people like me, especially the white men, we have to be willing to listen to people of color, black and brown people that have been abused for decades at this point, and that actually know the issues. So we have to hear the problems first, but we've been doing some of that now. There's been a lot of the social media and that. I think the ideas of defunding the police in general, it's a good concept. I think the problem is the wording of it scares a lot of people. I don't think anyone, for the most part, except for the real radicals, are talking about completely doing away with the police department. But I think the easy place to start is to say, why do we have weapons of war that are being shipped back home to the U.S. to be given to police departments, especially in these small towns and communities, and they have these major armored vehicles that they have to patrol the streets? There's just no use for it. That's completely that's a waste of money, is what it comes down to. That's a waste of our taxpayer dollars, even shipping it back for that purpose. Like it's ridiculous. And then those types of things just give the initiative to want to be used. If you have something like that, you're going to want to try to find a reason to use it as a police department. I mean, and just from budgetary reasons. So then you'll find a reason to use it, and it's probably not going to be a good reason. So that's where a good place to start. But I mean, there's a lot of measures that have to be enabled for that. There's a lot of things that have to be done, but I think it's a major, serious issue. I mean, you can pass all the legislation you want to say that this is illegal or that's illegal, or all these chokeholds are illegal and all that, and people push for that. But if you don't enforce any of it, I mean, it's already supposed to be illegal it's illegal as a police officer to physically murder someone, but they still do it. I mean, so you have to figure out something more than just law in this case. It really has to be a cultural change, I think.
From cyber interference in democratic elections to the proliferation of nuclear weapons, what defense or national security measures are necessary for dealing with emboldened world leaders and terrorists who are targeting the United States?
Ooh, okay. This is interesting. Yeah, cyber attacks and proliferation. These are very important topics. I think I think that stuff is important. The one thing we have to be careful of in our society and with our culture now, or with our government, I should say, is we have so many of these, whether they be the CIA, the NSA, all these defense industry that deal with whether it be electronic cyber means or whether it be other means of spying and that type of warfare. The problem is the unchecked balance of that. So I do agree that I think it is important that we maintain some we have to have that kind of program because we have to be able to look at other countries that are doing that type of stuff specific to cyber wars and that kind of stuff. Like we have to be smart with that, but we also can't let our own government basically be just as bad as another one in terms of invading our privacy, in terms of taking away our rights, in terms of spying on us and accumulating information. And then also it goes even beyond governments, because nowadays governments are one thing, but you have, as you pointed out, you have not only the terrorist groups that are looking to do bad things, but you also have corporations that love to just pry into your privacy in order, they want to get what you're interested in so they can try to sell you things and make money. So there's so many factors of this. And so like, I don't think that the CIA and the NSA and these organizations are outright bad, but I think that there does need to be a cultural change and the legal change in how we do things. And so we actually are looking at the enemy as something not inward. I mean, on some element you have to look for that, but like we shouldn't be randomly targeting our people. And this has been an ongoing thing for so long that you've had, the Snowden leaks and all these kind of things talk about. So, I mean, I think that it's very important to keep and maintain our own privacy rights here, because it's something that's very important to us as a country and our constitutional protections. And I guess the last thing I'll say is the nuclear proliferation thing. That's really important because one of the things right now that's really not getting talked about enough is, the media loves to latch onto this narrative of Trump and Putin and Trump and the Russians and all the stuff that they're buddy. But at the same time, we've actually seen them eroding the treaties that have kept us safe. And there's actually been a much more, fighting mentality going on with that. That's really dangerous. We're seeing an escalation and a buildup of these types of things between these two countries and a stripping away of the treaties. And that is not good at all, because that's, when we're here, maybe we'll get to the climate change and that sort of thing. But, I think the nuclear arms is as big of an issue as that, but it's not getting talked about as much anymore because maybe it's not a cool topic.
Well, climate change is coming, just so you know. We're almost there. In Congress, how would you deal with special interest groups, lobbyists, influencing policy in Washington, D.C.?
Well, it's difficult because I think this is where we're getting to the root of why am I running currently as a Green and not trying to run as a Democrat or Republican. Not that I would align myself with their beliefs, but just in general. And a lot of it's because I don't think either party actually does enough to try to combat the special interest groups. I think they talk one side of their mouth about how much they're against those things, but then out of the other side, they're making deals and taking all this money, and you see it. And it's not just the Republicans. I mean, the Democrats love to talk about the Republicans doing it, which they do, but the Democrats do it just as much, if not worse, depending on who you're looking at. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, there's a perfect example of somebody who's gained so much money from special interest groups. I mean, if you check out all the money that she's taken, it's ridiculous. So how do you get around that? Well, I mean, first of all, just pledging not to do it. I think we've seen progress in the last 4, 5, 6 years with candidates, and Bernie Sanders kind of started this, Senator Sanders, but other candidates too, with this idea of pledging just not to take it. And that you can actually run a formidable election or candidacy off of just small scale donations from supporters, but you have to have the mindset that you're going to continue with that. And I just really question a lot of the people that are elected and even the party leadership themselves on both sides, because I don't think they have that mindset. I think at the end of the day, even if they don't, they can say that they're against those things, but they're really not, because they keep taking the money. So you pretty much have to make that pledge. And I think you have to keep pointing it out. If you're going to try to actually make that work, you have to keep pointing out everybody else who's still doing it. If you're not taking the money, because it's the only way to keep it in the public sphere of influence, public sphere of awareness, basically. So long-winded, but that's what I'd say.
Do you or do you not believe humans are significantly contributing to climate change? Tell us why or why not.
I think so. The reason is basically just off of the scientific evidence that we've gotten from so many people that know more about this and studied this far longer than, I mean, obviously me, I don't study this at all, but that's the point. Most of us don't study this, but we should really just be listening to the experts. I mean, they've been talking about this for decades at this point. There's even some of these early corporations did their own internal analysis and found that humans were having an impact on the environment back in the 70s. And so now I think the only reason it's become this whole issue of people not buying into it is sort of because of the culture wars of the left and the right, and this whole idea of people don't want to be told what to believe or what to think, which I get. But at the end of the day, you have to look at the experts who say things. And I think it's important because this is another thing where so much of it is the framing and the way we frame this, because a lot of people on the right don't like to buy in. They're not convinced on the climate change, and they're not convinced on global warming, or they're not convinced on CO2 and all these sort of things. It's hard to see these things. It's hard to understand them. But I think we all can come together and say, hey, okay, I don't necessarily care what you feel about that. Let's talk about clean air, clean water, clean land. I don't think anybody, some of our hunters that are proud Republicans that go out hunting, do you want your woods to be filled with oil and plastics and all these other things and pollutants? Like, no one wants that. It's not good for the game, fish, and wildlife. It's not good for anybody who wants to live that kind of life. So I think a lot of it is just redirecting our mindset to think about it in that terms. Like, let's stop like back and forth fighting over these terminologies, and let's just realize that clean water, clean land, and clean earth is good for us all, like regardless of where your political beliefs are elsewhere.
West and Southwest Michigan, both known for natural resources. Are there additional protections you believe are needed for protecting the waters, forests, and farmlands?
Well, I think you can always strengthen those things. Some of the biggest issues when you look at from a federal level is we're supposed to have these federal protection, EPA and such, that are looking after these things, but so many of these things have been so defunded and detoothed that now what can they really do? Like, if you don't have the money to actually follow through and do something, you're literally, you can't do anything. And so that's the main thing, is like, how we have to be able to allocate the resources to actually fight this stuff, and we have to go after the real corporations that are causing these problems. And I think that's so much of the issue here is I mean, even Donald Trump wants to talk about, he cares about these things, but then he takes all the money away from the agencies that could actually clean it up, or he puts in place people that don't actually have any desire to follow through on the mission of the agency. So then it's like, what are you going to do with that? But I think it puts the states in a difficult position too, because like there's the states can try to pass policies and proposals, but they just don't have the kind of money to enforce that the federal government does collectively. And so I think that's why it's really important that we continue to strengthen and embolden on a federal level, because that's really, I mean, you can't have a polluted lake in Lake Michigan and have that not affect every state and waterway that connects around it. So, it really is, it's always going to be a national issue, even if it seems localized for the most part. I mean, any oil spill, land spill, it all gets into the waterways, and then it creates issues that go far, far farther than where it starts. So you have to strengthen and make these things give real teeth to these sorts of protections.
Under what dire circumstance or government necessity would you be willing to increase or support a tax increase?
To me, I get annoyed with the media framework of this to some degree. And I mean, it's the same way the politicians frame it too. So it's not all on the media, but the point is, you want to talk about taxes, more taxes, less taxes, more taxes, less taxes. Well, at the end of the day, it should be about good taxes. It should be about taxes that are actually being spent on things that people want and will improve their lives. I mean, that's what I find when I talk to people. It's not so much even people on the right. They don't always say, oh, I hate taxes outright. They hate taxes because they see that it doesn't go to helping them. And so I think that's the biggest thing. So I'm completely fine with raising taxes. But with that, you have to look at it too, because raising taxes on people making less than $30,000 a year or something, they don't need that. They just can't. Like, their lives are already on edge anyway, enough. But when you talk about people that are making millions of dollars a year, and especially even with that, we talk about millionaires, but the bigger thing is billionaires, like on the corporate side of things. I mean, when you're making billions of dollars a year, there's definitely a discussion on how much of that money deserves to be taxed. And I think it's significantly more than where it is now. And you're talking about ordinary average families. I mean, to a degree, yes, but I think most of the tax increases should be getting focused on individuals of significant wealth in this country, like significant, not even necessarily just millionaires, but billionaires, with the B. That's the key point here. But I mean, overall, I think it's, like I said, the main thing is it just has to be smart taxation. It needs to be taxes that actually work toward bettering people's lives instead of just being wasted on programs and policies that no one is a fan of.
There are a number of economists concerned with growing wealth disparity as a threat to the country's future economic growth and prosperity. Do you concur, disagree? Explain your stance on this.
I mean, I think it is a threat to economic, to anything to do with our economic success in this country. I mean, the wealth disparity is really bad. And if you look at the research and you look at the people that have studied this, it's at really the worst it's been right now since times of the Great Depression. I mean, at least that's what a lot of the research would say. And I think there's a real issue with this because if people, if you see the middle class is shrinking, we basically just developed two classes now in this country, or we're on our way there. We have a very ever shrinking middle class, and then we have a very much expanding lower class working poor. And then you have people at the top that are continuing to get more and more wealthy. And that's what's interesting too, is even amongst the wealthy, there's the same sort of process going on. You actually have less people that are sort of in the middle, and you have more people that are billionaires, and then more people that are becoming sort of like your lower level millionaire. It's very interesting when you get into that. But I think it's bad for the society because if you don't have, I mean, if you look at this, what we dealt with the pandemic, perfect example. You don't have money, people don't have savings, you deal with some kind of issue like this and you can't live, your family is suffering, you don't have the means to be able to afford missing a paycheck. That's bad, and that puts the whole country at a standstill, as we've seen happen. And you've seen all these people lose jobs, and then you lose jobs, that means your local areas, your communities are going to go down. You're going to lose local jobs that employ more people. It's just it's a spiraling process, but you can't expect it to stay the way it is now or get worse and that somehow we'll be okay. It's just not going to work like that.
Do you believe the nation should invest in alternative energy or rely on fossil fuels, securing energy independence?
I think that anyone who's looked at the actual research of this knows that the renewable energies is the way to go for the future. I mean, here's the thing, and I'll get back to it, like what I was saying for some of the other stuff I was talking about. Economically, it's not just a left-right issue of like, oh, help the birds, help the planet, help the polar bears and all this kind of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of people on the left that like to cling to that idea, and that's fine. I mean, I'm all about supporting that too. But at the end of the day, we're getting to a point now where it's literally cheaper to build an entire brand new solar farm than it is to renovate an already existing fossil fuel plant to make it, up to modern standards. So when you're getting to a point like that, you have to start asking the question, what are we doing with these fossil fuels companies and corporations and this whole industry? Why are we trying to drag it on down the road essentially when it's clearly going to be going away? And I think that's what's irresponsible about what Trump has done, and members on the Democratic Party too, to some extent, to try to push into this narrative that somehow we're going to save the coal plants or we're going to save these dying industries. I mean, that's just not true. Like economically, we're not, because it's not even about whether you agree with it or not. From a cultural standpoint, it's just literally not profitable anymore compared to where wind and solar is. So that's the big thing. I think eventually you're going to have to close all that down. And the one thing I think on this topic that I should bring up while I can is nuclear energy, because nuclear energy is the other key in this that I think isn't necessarily getting a lot of discussion. And I'm not someone who thinks that you have to outright close every nuclear power plant, but I think what a smart thing to do with that is by and large the cleaner, safer, quote unquote safer version of non-renewable energy, or I don't know, something that isn't wind or solar. But you definitely, if you're going to have that, I think a lot of our plants, we have to look at what is really dilapidated. We probably should shut down a significant majority of them immediately, and then take some of the ones that are still in better condition and just renovate and put a lot more money into making sure that they're safe and secure, and that we have some kind of a program to upkeep them for the future, at least in the foreseeable 10, 20, 30 years.
John, final question. Are you ready? Here we go. Is there a moral or personal issue you support that is in opposition to your party's ideology? What is it, and why do you strongly adhere to your beliefs?
Moral. Well, I mean, I guess this would count underneath it. I don't necessarily think that that the Green Party is against gun ownership or the Second Amendment, but I think there's a lot of ideology that maybe they're, the left-leaning minds and mentality are naturally, against the Second Amendment people and the people that support that. And that's something that I can outright say is not true for me. I have plenty of friends that are gun owners and that hunt and do all that kind of stuff. And I'm 100% supportive of that, because I think it is a Second Amendment right. And you can have a discussion over the legal framework and what that means on a constitutional level. And that's valid. But at least for the time at hand, the way it's been ruled is that people have a right to own guns. They have the right to bear arms. And so I think a lot of people on the left, there's like there's sort of a misconception by and large that people on the left, that there's no one there that supports guns and they all just want to take your guns away. And I think the right wing takes advantage of that, of that mentality, and they run with it because it scares a lot of people away from voting for Democrats or leftists or liberals and that stuff. So I would be proudly able to say that I am not on board with that, and that I think that if you are a legal gun owner and you have your guns, that you should have the legal right to be able to own those things and operate them. And as long as it's being done safely and you're not a criminal, then I mean, I'm all in favor of it.
Green Party candidate John Lawrence from Kalamazoo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Very much appreciated.